please welcome David Dorrance and take it away.
All right. Thank you for that introduction. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm going to do a short-ish talk. I'm going to try and like blitz through it because I want to cover a few things, and I know we've got like a limited amount of time. I want to leave stuff open for questions for people. So I didn't actually submit the talk title to be this, but at the last minute, I kind of changed it to a talk called "The Good, the Bad, and the Untold of Design Systems and Web Components," and hopefully that will play out as you might see in these slides and what I'm going to present. So let's run through it. So yeah, we're going to go through the good, the bad, and the untold. So the good thing is like what's good about web components and what works for us at Nord Health in Nord Design System. And then the bad, like some of the drawbacks we've encountered. I'm just going to keep them kind of short, like a couple of things that we've encountered that you might want to watch out for. And other learnings from building a design system and implementing it. It's not necessarily to do with specifically web components, but I thought it would be worth sharing just from like an experience. I'm not saying that these are right or wrong. This is just like what we've encountered from our work on creating and then implementing a design system. So yeah, just to introduce myself. Yeah, I'm Dave. I'm team lead on Nord Design System at Nord Health. You can find me at darn.es. Yeah, I'm also on Mastodon. It's David Darns at mastodon.design. But if you go to darn.es, you'll find everything there to follow me or ask me questions. And this is the Nord Design System team. We have a variety of people ranging from full like design experience through right to engineering and front-end development experience and everything in between as well. A lot of our team and actually everybody wears like many different hats, as people would say, ranging from front-end to design. So yeah. And yeah, our team works on nordhealth.design, which is the design documentation site. So that's the kind of output from all of our components and icons and fonts and all of that kind of stuff. And then our company is nordhealth.com, and Nordhealth is a company that produces applications for the veterinary sector and the healthcare sector. So Nord is used across all of those products, which is, I think it might be in the double figures now of different applications we provide for those sectors. And Nord Design System is used in varying amounts on all of those products. And I'll go into a little bit more detail in that in the later slides. All right, let's get into it. What's good? What's good about web components in a design system? So firstly, web components are portable. It's funny, like in our team, we've often called web components as just spicy embeds or spicy iframes. Like they are like very easy to like drop into other things. Like components in other architectures tend to be like they have to stay inside that architecture, as opposed to this where you can like drop it in anywhere, and you could do it with the tag itself, the web component tag, and then the script, and that's about it. And when I say script, I mean the JavaScript import tag. So yeah, like that's how it's normally done, but in Nord we do it ever slightly differently. We import a CSS file as well, which is the main like framework file for all of our components. And not only does that provide like lots of like helpers and tooling and tokens for all of our colors and sizings and borders and stuff, but it also like feeds those properties into our components. So the example shown here is a date picker, and that date picker is styled with styles within the component itself, but also a series of custom properties that get fed into that component. And just to add a little bit of context, I'd recommend looking into the spec of web components on styles. Is that components web components having style encapsulation, but there are a set of styles that are inheritable that feed into it, and one of those is custom properties. So that means that you can kind of create styles that get fed into that component quite easily. So you can inherit stuff and kind of listen to what the rest of the page has been styled to do. So we have like accent colors and stuff. So in this example, there's a blue border and blue number for the selected date that could be changed with one CSS property change, and that will permeate like throughout all of the components. But anyway, I'm sidetracking. Yeah, the web components super portable. It means that we can like put them anywhere. We can put them into any context. We can put them into like, we can put them into React. We can put them into Nuxt or Vue. We could put it into vanilla HTML and just drop it straight in there. And we've really seen that benefit because we use that for across our documentation right through to complex applications that we've built in Nuxt and other frameworks. Web components can be incremental. So when I say web components can be incremental, they can be incrementally adopted. So you don't have to kind of go, right, we're building this application, we need to convert everything to web components. That's not necessary. Web components can be drip fed in. You can add them piecemeal. The example shown here on the right is two drop downs. So the drop down on the left is actually in a application built in Nuxt, and that actually isn't like available to view yet. We're still working on that. But the example on the right, the drop down on the right, is in a project that is like, I found out yesterday, 9 years old. It's a 9-year-old Django project that we've had running for 9 years, for a considerable amount of time, and that is the same drop-down component that we've built in web components. So you can see like the styles are the same. There's some slight deviation, but those like work quite elegantly in both contexts, and we did very little to kind of manipulate those into place. It wasn't a case of, how do we fight these styles? How do we like fight all these events and things like that? It's like, no, well, we'll drop the HTML in on both of them, drop the script tag in, and drop our styles that import, and it just works. And we've really benefited from that. So we're in the process of kind of unifying two applications that we have in parallel, and we're creating this, the benefit of a design system is consistency, and we're really seeing that with the implementation of these components, because they are quite robust, that whatever context they're in. Yeah, moving on. Web components are just HTML. I should probably put a little asterisk on there because they aren't just HTML, but the general gist is like, yeah, they do operate like HTML. They can work with HTML, they can contain HTML, and that's when you drop a component into the page, you can put HTML within the opening and closing tags, and they can be built of HTML as well. So when we construct the component, it can be HTML inside of that, inside the shadow DOM, as it's called, which is really beneficial because like HTML has been around for such a long time. It's like, it's a great standard to be built upon. We don't have to kind of learn some new syntax or learn a new entirely different language just to build components. Like, it's wrapped up HTML. So the example I'm showing here is actually lifted directly from our design system documentation site. So we have a component called Nord Toast Group, and that's Toast. That's a notification that pops up from the bottom, and this is a component that contains those different toasts, and you can see that it's dropped straight into the page just as is, alongside regular HTML elements and other components as well. And then below it there, I've shown like what's inside of it. So inside of it is actually a Nord Toast singular toast component, and then inside the shadow DOM it's just HTML again, and we're using some ARIA and some roles to like give that semantics that we want inside of that component, and encapsulating all of it inside of one useful reusable component. So it's really nice to be able to mix and match and put everything together without having to learn a new language or deviate from what would normally be on the page anyway. Another good thing, well, this seems like maybe a bit of an advertising ploy, but it's genuinely not. It's like using web components with Lit. So Lit is the framework that we use to create our web components. We've really benefited from it a lot because it does make the experience of making web components a lot smoother and a lot more expected. There's been a few occasions where I've not used Lit and then written stuff in the way that I would do in Lit just because it seems quite natural. I'd highly recommend checking it out and seeing if it works for you folks. It's really worked in our case. Like there's a lot of like adjacent libraries and tooling that goes well with it, and we've benefited from those as well. Yeah, I would recommend checking it out. I've put here about like it works with your frameworks, but that's just web components in general. That web components can just work with any other framework anyway. Lit doesn't even have to come into the equation when building the actual application. Like the component output is the component output. All right, I've yabbered on enough. I'm gonna go into the bad. And I will say take this bad stuff with a pinch of salt, because it's not. I'm not saying it's bad because I'm not saying it's bad. Like, don't do it. I'm saying it's bad. Like, I wish it was better, but it's surmountable issues. It's not issues that's going to be a complete blocker unless it's specific for your case. There might be cases where it doesn't suit your needs and you need to go elsewhere, which is completely understandable. Okay. So web components and React. I needed to mention this because it is a kind of point in contention, at least from my view, in the web components community. React 18, the current version of React, I believe, is not completely compatible with web components, which is a shame. It's a shame, really, because it would work really well. There's going to be loads of applications that would benefit from it. There are ways around that. For example, I just mentioned Lit, and Lit has a adjacent library in their project for wrapping up web components into a React component. So it means that you can just write the component as if it was just a regular React component anyway. And that's how we do it at Nordhealth. We have like a build process where it wraps up all of the components into a React wrapped version, and then we supply that as a separate library to anybody who's has an application in React and they want to use our components. So there are plenty of like ways around it, but hopefully in React 19 this will become a thing of the past. That's at least at the time of writing. Maybe things have changed more recently since then, but I've mentioned at the bottom custom. If you go to custom-elements-everywhere.com, that's a really good resource to look for what frameworks work with web components. And at the minute it looks like it's everything but React. And even so, React kind of works majoritively well with web components anyway. Another kind of slight detriment to web components is web component communication. And when I say web component communication, I mean trying to get web components to speak to each other or have like a symbiotic relationship of some kind. So even on like a simplified level, like say you had an element on the page that was being used to describe a nested element inside of a web component. Sadly, you can't like directly do that, because if you had a component that's like an identifier and then using that identifier inside of the shadow DOM, it doesn't quite work as expected. It's because the shadow DOM inside of a web component is a completely self-contained context, which is like both a benefit and like a detriment. So like this comes up in cases of like a pop-out component or a popover, where that nested element inside you've created, you want to reference something that describes it outside of that web component, which can be quite frustrating. Another things like form submissions, like you have to create additional like wiring to make sure that web components actually play nicely with the form element itself. That is getting improved. That is definitely improving, and there are fairly simple ways of kind of remedying that, but it is something to watch out for. To create that communication between components can be a little bit you've got to be wary of it. That's all I'm saying. Web components rendered on the server. Yeah, so this is in relation to declarative shadow DOM. So declarative shadow DOM is a fairly recent addition to web components, where you can construct the web component in HTML. So the example I'm showing on the right here is a example dash component, and then inside of that example dash component is a template, and that template is literally a template for the component. So inside of that there is a button and then a slot, and that slot would get filled with whatever is being added to the remainder of the component creation there. So this is great. This means that we can construct web components on the page without using JavaScript, and we can server-side construct it and render it. That's great, but we're missing reusability, dryness. Like there's a lot of like problems when you switch to doing this. It's like quite an upheaval. We're not using declarative shadow DOM in our stuff as of yet. Because of these reasons. We want to be able to create components that are portable and reusable, and that implementers don't have to deal with all the innards so much. Like, we want to provide them with a very well-made component that they can just drop in and get on with their work. They shouldn't have to be copying and pasting so much stuff, and it becomes all the more like problematic for, like, if you were to put this example component 4 times on the page, you'd have to define the template every single time. It's not as great as as imagined. I understand like why this is the case, and hopefully it will improve over time. But right now, the way that we use web components, the benefits of it aren't like provided with this new addition. There are compilers and methods of getting around this, but at the same time, it's a little bit fragile, and hopefully we'll be able to come back to it at a later date and improve. So yeah, so that's the some of the bads. I did have more stuff for the good and the bad, but now I'm just going to go through a couple of things that we've experienced as part of Nordhealth and implementing or providing and implementing Nord Design System to the rest of our team. So this isn't specifically to do with web components, but it is to do with our design system and how we've experienced implementing it. So yeah, encouraging implementers to communicate. From our experience, we've had it where we've had like quite a range of people, where there'll be some people who are super keen to like implement the design system and like chomping at the bit, like they're ready to go. They want to get it added into their project. And then there'll be other cases where people are relatively like silent, and it's not because they hate the cause or anything like that, but it's just uncertainty and unsureness, and like, is this going to make my work harder? Is it going to make it more complicated? So we've benefited tremendously from providing as many options as possible for implementers of the design system to communicate with us. So we have Slack channels, we have weekly open hours, we have feedback methods to like provide feedback on not only the design system, but also us to have the opportunity to feedback to them. Like, it could be a case where they want to create something with a design system and they don't realize that it can be done with the elements that are provided, or some of the styles that we have in our helpers and things like that. Like, sharing this knowledge constantly is going to really speed up the process and learn from each other. So giving everybody like the opportunity to chime in and discuss and chat and feel welcome is going to be really beneficial to your team and to other teams that are using the design system. And to follow on from that, design system guidance, I mentioned it just before, is to do with providing guidance, like providing examples, providing best practices, code reviews, like in pull requests and things like that. Like any opportunity to steer people in the right direction is going to help people to learn how to approach using a design system in general. Like, it's not just the case of like, oh, you should use the drop down in this way. They're not going to just learn from using the drop down in that way, but they're also going to learn how to use the pop out and maybe the tooltip and all that kind of stuff. Like they're going to learn how we've approached the design system and how they should approach using it as well. I think constantly like pursuing that and keeping that going also facilitates that previous point of like communication. It's going to make people feel more welcome and help people to learn a bit more of the cause and the plan for what the design system is meant to do and meant to achieve for the company. So yeah, I think that's everything on that. Yeah, so this is final slide. This is just some learning resources that I recommend. There's a few articles here. I can screenshot this and share this with you, but if you like search things. So Ariel on the design system team, she's got some great articles on her website, but this is a really good article about leading successful product teams. I've learned a lot from her, and I would recommend reading the points that she's shared on that. The good, the bad, and the web components. Yeah, I'll admit, maybe I did accidentally steal Zach's heading for the talk, but never mind. I would highly recommend his talk on specifically to do with web components. It is really good. It goes through the good and the bad in like a lot more detail, a lot more to do with the spec, especially to do with declarative shadow DOM. Really recommend that. I've written an article for web.dev on how we use custom properties. I mentioned it earlier on in the talk, to do with how we use custom properties to like apply our tokens into components. Also got an article that I did a while back on how we approach doing tabs and tab groups inside of the Nord design system. And finally, Manuel has this great directory of web component accessibility articles. He's done an amazing job of going through everything, and I've yet to go through it all, but it's really good to learn about accessibility issues and benefits that could be inside of web components. So I'd recommend checking that out because it's got a lot of things you want to watch out for. And that is it. Thank you. If you have any questions, then please go ahead.
Thank you so much for this presentation. This is super nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've really come a long way with the web components, and there's also so many components that you've worked through, like the various different types: navigation, tables, forms, each with their own challenges. There's a question in the chat from Ruurt about global CSS. It's already been partially answered, but global CSS, does it affect styling? And how does global styling affect web components that you use, that you render in a light DOM?
Right. So yeah, you mentioned light DOM and shadow DOM. So light DOM, I'm striking a blank with that one a little bit. I don't know the super details of like how that will affect like styles specifically, but we tend to make use of shadow DOM more so. And that means that majority of styles don't leak in. There are inheritable styles that do, but that is like just how like CSS kind of behaves. So the inheritable ones would be like color, like font color or font size and things like that. They're almost like kind of accessible things where you want the font to like match the rest of the page, but you can also reset that within the web component, and you'll prevent anything kind of leaking in at all. it's kind of optional. But like around the surrounding area, if you were to do like a star selector on everything, you're going to get a border on the edge of the component itself. But leaking in, no, unless you want it to. And there is like levels at which you can kind of allow stuff to fall in or completely block out. And I would recommend not going too hard on like say no styles in, like, because sometimes you get like kind of inherited benefits of just letting the cascade do what it wants in some ways. So just be careful.
Yeah, some flexibility is also good, right? So one thing that you have when you offer your web or your component library in the Shadow DOM that also like reduces the influence people have, and they need to rely on the features that you add to the web components. So have you ever experienced that people like consider the web component development team like a bottleneck because you're already working on some stuff and they want some feature and oh no, it's in the Shadow DOM, so we cannot build it ourselves?
Yes, we have had a few occasions on that. Like the best remedies we've had is one to do with the addition of custom properties inside of our web components, which means that we kind of open up certain styles for them to control. Again, it reminds me of like embeds where you can say, oh, I'll put some attributes on this embed and style it how I want it to, but they're quite locked in. They're not like completely opening up all the wires. We've kind of allowed it to be fed in, because not only does that keep the styling like not too wild in terms of control, but it also means that as we improve the component, we might want to reuse that color in other areas or like other features that we add to that web component. So that's one thing. And then another thing is like we provide countless examples for our components. We do it for like, we do it with CodePen, we do it like just in line, like just checking it into Slack, but we just countless examples to help people see how flexible we've provided those components. Like we've got a pop-out component, and that is literally just a pop-out, and you can put anything inside of it, more or less. And I think we just need to kind of show people the way a little bit, like I said previously in one of the slides.
Yeah, it's also pretty easy to grasp if you just use a web component. It works like any other element. It's also so nice to see that a 9-year-old project was able to migrate like step by step or just use one component. Have you had any major challenges making web components accessible? Like I noticed that the form components are in inside the Shadow DOM. Are you using attached internals, for example?
Yes, I think we are to do that. That has been a little bit of an issue, but I'll admit that I think that was remedied before I even joined the team. By Nick and Ariel. So I don't know like the full details of that, but there has been, I have to say, there's the issues that we've encountered haven't been any more so than any other like framework we may have like used. Like the benefits kind of outshine it like tenfold, especially when you have projects that are like the variety that we have Nuxt, we have React, we have Vanilla, we have Django, we have Ruby.
Yeah.
Like there's all these different frameworks flying around, and thankfully we can provide for those in one swoop, rather than saying you got to use React or you got to use Vue.
Yeah, web components might be one of those things where the web components, the good parts might be actually the bigger book, and the bad parts is the small book.
Yeah, yeah. I kind of shouldn't have spent too long on the bad bits, really, because they're just saying like, here be dragons, like just be careful.
Yeah. So Niels is also curious about web components and SEO. Does it go into the good bits or the bad bits? Does it affect SEO badly that there's not a H1 element, but perhaps a web component?
That's a great question. As far as I'm aware, I would have thought that the SEO of that would be perfectly fine, because I mean, if you had a web, I mean, web components are pretty much just extra HTML elements, and there are all the kind of complex HTML elements have Shadow DOM anyway. So like details and summary have Shadow DOM elements in there. They have like divs inside of them that, you know, the browser has built in. And the SEO of that, you don't not get to the summary content that will get indexed. So, you know, by logic means the rest of it should get indexed as well. And not only that, like it would be, if it's SEO content, that would be slotted anyway, so it would just be in the page, so it should be fine.
Yeah, I've been wondering about that myself. I don't really have the official answer, but I always figured that Google basically made Chrome the super fast browser, so they could use Chrome to index web pages, and now they have Chrome, they can use the accessibility tree to scan web pages and just use that for SEO. But who knows what they do internally? I guess. So thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, just to add, like more recently it does run JavaScript when they crawl the pages, but you wouldn't even need that anyway because the content would just be inside the slotted element. So the SEO would be fine.
Yeah, I would hope so. Unfortunately, this is all we have time for today. Like I could go on talking about web components for hours, and I think many more people in the chat could too. So Dave, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. I hope many people will follow you and the other folks from the team also here in the chat, and Ariel on Mastodon for more information.